Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is going to be the second time I record this podcast because when I was setting up the lighting for this and getting the white balance with this tool right here, you put it over the lens and you take a picture and then you use that as the reference point for your white balance. I forgot to turn autofocus back onto my camera. So the Serious Keto sign back there, that was in focus. Me, no, not at all. So complete redo on the podcast. On the bright side, maybe I'll do it better this time and probably faster as well. So I want to start out by saying that I'm very excited. I was able to get a hold of a couple of people that I wanted to get a hold of for doing future interviews in the podcast. So I've explained before that I want to do probably one interview per month with some other content creator or person in the keto world, or peripheral to the keto world even. And next week I will be interviewing Heavenly Fan. So I know a number of you are very excited about that. I'm very excited about that. She's kind of been off the grid for the last 3 months or longer, so it'll be fun to find out what she's been up to. That video will probably go live first or second week in September. In September also, I will be interviewing Carolyn Ketchum of All Day I Dream About Food. So I was finally able to connect with her. I was afraid that she was ignoring me or something, but apparently my method of trying to get a hold of her was not that good. So it's on me. But the important part is we were able to connect. We will record something in September, likely for an October release. Additionally, a number of people said I should have an interview with Amy from Carnivore's Angel. I screwed that up on the other podcast too. And based on when this podcast, the one I'm doing right at this moment, releases, probably we would have interviewed last Wednesday, which is in the future for me at the moment, but will be in the past for you by the time you watch this. And I'm not sure when she plans on airing it, but then we'll return the favor later on in the year and I'll interview her for my channel. So we've got the next 3 months definitely taken care of for interviews, which gives me some time to kind of try and connect the dots on a couple of other people. So I'm very excited about that. All right, so we've crossed that off the list for the second time. The next thing I want to talk about is just sort of a random observation that I made. We had some water softener salt delivered the other day, and normally they've got some younger guy that carries them down and loads up our water softener, but we weren't at home, so they just left them by the garage, and I had to bring them in. So 300 pounds of softener salt, 50 pounds a bag. And as I'm carrying them down the stairs on my shoulder, it occurred to me, I used to weigh more than this. So I know that I lost at least 75 pounds. I quit weighing myself when I hit 230. And I managed to get down to 155 at one point. I've put some back on. Fortunately, a lot of that is muscle. But as I'm carrying this 50-pound bag, I realized I used to carry this plus 50% more all day, every day. No wonder I got tired walking up a flight of stairs and was huffing and puffing. No wonder I was just miserable. And the reason I bring this up is I love analogy, I love metaphor. I'm a word person, or a picture person, a visual person. I like visual words, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And as you go on and continue your journey, so some of you, maybe you've met your goal in terms of health and weight loss. Some of you are still working on it, but I know that you've all made progress. And it feels good sometimes to put that into perspective, to think of a household item or something that essentially you were carrying around all day long, and now you're free from. That's pretty cool. The next topic I want to discuss is about perception. And I'll start by saying that in my life, very often things happen serendipitously. Whether you just want to call it a coincidence or whether you want to say there's a higher power acting on things, the stars aligned, whatever it is, very often things happen in my life that seem to align for a reason. And those two things that aligned are the video that I did probably will be about 10 days ago, or maybe almost 2 weeks ago by the time this video comes out, on freezing and then toasting bread to make a resistant starch. So that's sort of the one thing, that video and the comments that I got on that video. The other thing that aligned with it is a book that I randomly picked it out of my Audible library. I've got so many books in my Audible audiobook library, and I picked this one just because it was shorter. It was, 6.5 hours long, and it's about persuasion. I thought, okay, interesting topic. Now, I'm not going to tell you the name of the book or the author yet, because what I want to talk about is the chapter that I got to right as this video came out, the toast video, and the comments that I was getting on that video, because that chapter is about perception. And I saw some very interesting things in my comments, or in the comments to me, that aligned with what this author was talking about in terms of perception. So perception, or filters, the filters that we have, the filters that we see the world through, shape our reality. And one of the things that he gets into is there really a reality? Because all of us have different filters that we can see the same event through and perceive it very differently. And the book does get fairly political, and I want to avoid politics here. Not just me speaking, but also in the comments down below. Let's try to avoid anything political. Okay? Thank you. But what I saw in terms of filters, there were a couple of them that I noticed in the comments on that video. One of the filters was this perception that I don't like Dr. Mandel, or that I've got an axe to grind with him, or I wanted to make him look like a fool, or something like that. And I watched the video like 6 times when I was editing it, and then I rewatched it a couple of times trying to figure out where did I say anything like that. What I was pointing out was the fact that there was this study that I had doubts in. I had doubts in it statistically, and I had doubts just based on some of my experiments previously on resistant starch. But there was this perception that somehow I was, I hate Dr. Mandel. No, that is not the case. I don't know the guy. I've watched a couple of his videos. That's about the extent of it. Interestingly, though, I had other people say, it's so great that you and Dr. Mandel are working together. In fact, I got an email from one of the companies that I work with saying, I didn't know you and Dr. Mandel were friends or collaborators. Could you introduce us? So, 2 entirely different perceptions, neither of which are accurate. I'm kind of just in between. I was a guy who saw a video by another guy based on a study, and I wanted to test that study. So, interesting how perceptions color people's realities. The other perceptions or filters that I saw there were some people that had a filter that felt I was saying, for better or worse, that you can eat white bread now on keto. Just all you got to do is freeze it and then toast it, and you can eat white bread. You see those same sort of comments over on Dr. Mandel's video. And to me, that's a concerning filter, because I do believe that for many of us, carbs are an addiction, similar to how for many of us, alcohol is an addiction. And here's another, words or pictures thing, an analogy. To me, saying that by freezing and then toasting bread, we can reduce the blood glucose spike by 30% is similar to saying, here's a way to drink alcohol and not have a hangover. You're improving something bad by a little. It's still not a good thing. My blood glucose spike was still over 30 on that bread. If that were a keto bread and I did a review of it and said, hey, this is a keto bread, and it still spiked me over 30 points, people would say, I'm not eating that. Yet, I do white bread, and a number of people thought, Steve is saying it's okay to eat white bread. No, especially like a commercial white bread, there's just all manner of trash in that. So yeah, if you got that perception, then I would say you probably were watching this through some sort of a filter. Now, there are other people that have a filter that is really, really dogmatic keto, and they think that any sort of delivery mechanism is a gateway to bread. A chaffle is a gateway to bread. Keto bread is a gateway to bread. Maybe, I suppose that's possible. But for them, they're just like, suck it up, go carnivore, whatever. And I don't think that for the most part, keto breads, especially a homemade keto bread or chaffle, is a gateway back to bread any more than having an iced tea would be a gateway back to a Long Island iced tea or some other alcoholic beverage. But people have filters and they see things and they hear things a certain way. And then it's very hard for them to let go of that, and they can get very, very argumentative. The author talks about that in his book. So I guess in summary, what I'll say is this might wind up being a topic of its own on an episode of Pragmatic Keto, where I kind of talk about my thoughts about resistant starch, because I feel I got a couple more experiments to do yet on that, as well as, do I see this as a gateway, or do I see it as a way to kind of create a modified keto? I don't know. I need to experiment more and pull my thoughts together on that. But when I do, like I said, it'll probably wind up being an episode of Pragmatic Keto. Now, before the break, I was talking about this audiobook that I'm listening to, and I'm probably only 25% of the way into it, maybe a third of the way into it. And the reason I didn't want to tell you the name of the book or the author is because then that's going to be in your brain while I'm talking. And that is potentially going to create a filter. So you may wind up seeing or hearing something that I didn't necessarily say or do because you've now got that filter. The book, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I don't want to turn this into like any sort of a quasi-review, but the book is called Win Bigly, and it's by Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert. When I read or listen to books, I often ask myself, who is the target audience of this particular book? And in a way, I sort of struggle with who the target audience is for this book, because the author, Scott Adams, is a self-described ultra-liberal. Yet a significant focus of this book seems to be his admiration for Donald Trump as a persuader. And there's a whole lot of stuff in there about the 2016 election. And I feel that if you're on the left or if you're on the right, you're probably going to find something in this book that rubs you the wrong way. I think if you're someone who's generally gotten fatigued on politics in this country, I know I have, that also, there's too much politics in this particular book. But if you can sort of detach yourself and avoid having a filter as you read or listen to this book, there is some very interesting stuff in there, including, I talked about the filters, I guess I didn't talk about, some big elements are cognitive dissonance and bias confirmation. And I'm at a point in the book, or got to a point in the book, at the same time I released that video, where I was seeing a lot of what Scott Adams was describing in the comments to my own video, where you see, he shows you how to identify cognitive dissonance. When somebody is struggling because the facts and their reality, they don't mesh, they respond very often with some hostility. And he actually describes how to tell if you've won an internet argument just by certain tells, kind of like poker tells, things that people will say or do in comments. Things like, he says, usually they start with some sort of an acronym like OMG or WTF or SMH or whatever it is. And then there is some sort of an attack that is a far bigger attack than the situation calls for. Oftentimes then some sort of a nasty emoji. And then he describes other sort of behaviors or filters. And one of them he referenced that really kind of stuck in my brain was the psychic psychiatrist. This is when people argue that they know what's going on in your brain and they're telling you what your motivation or agenda was. So I got some of that on my video, and it's interesting to just see how those things sync up. Anyhow, I don't want to do a book review of it. I'm only, like I said, 25-30% of the way into it. It does seem to meander a bit. It does seem to be repetitive an awful lot. But maybe that's part of Scott Adams' style. Maybe that's part of his persuasion in the book. I don't know. But if I eventually do a review of that book, it would be over on Lean Body Mind, not here. The only reason I bring it up is just because I thought it was very interesting that some of the topics he was pointing out in terms of persuasion and filters are exactly what I was on the receiving end over on that other video. The final topic for this podcast is a partial revisit of a topic that I had talked about before, but with some more fresh information. And that was talking about high school reunions and how I haven't attended any of mine since the 10th. And even then I left early because I was so disgusted by those people. But I talked about how I spent a lot of time being bullied and picked on and marginalized throughout grade school and middle school or junior high, whatever they call it in your part of the country, and high school. And I had gone back and looked at a Facebook group of the last class reunion, which was, I think, our 35th anniversary. And just looking at so many of these people kind of made me feel a little bit better about myself, as petty as that may sound. I have not had any contact with, I think, anyone from high school outside of, briefly at my 10th anniversary for, the 36 years since I graduated. I went a different place. And to me, high school was part of the past, grade school was part of the past that I was very happy to leave behind. Throughout that period, I had one friend for the longest time. I think he and I became friends probably in second grade, and by fifth grade, we were best friends. And we stayed best friends until about junior year in high school. And the reason we quit being best friends junior year in high school is, although we were both not popular, we were both sort of marginalized. We were looked at as nerds or geeks or whatever. Me, because I was into computers and video games and fantasy and things like that. He was very much into comic books and comic book collection. He was way ahead of the curve, I think, on that too. He kept everything in, these plastic sleeves with cardboard backing, and he was into Marvel back when everybody was all about DC back in the 70s. But the way he approached, I think, being sort of not a popular person at our high school was he started hanging out with friends from a different high school. My response was I got into drama. It seemed like a lot of the geeks and marginalized folks wind up in drama, and that was me. But like I said, he and I hadn't spoken. I hadn't seen him in 36 years and found out last week that he died. And I don't feel like a sadness because, like I said, it's been 2/3 of my life that I have not seen him and not even really thought about him. But since I found out that he died, all I can do is sort of think about him. And it's kind of crazy how crystal clear all of my memories are of how much we hung out together, all the things we did together. And, we went through adolescence at the same time, which is sort of, I think, a pivotal time in a person's life. But it's just, it's one of those things where I guess it's one of those things where I look at the number of my classmates who have died, and I had a small class. I think there was 100, give or take, people in my graduating class. I think 8 or 9 have died already, and I think 5 of them by suicide, which strikes me as a high number. But then, as I indicated in that other podcast, looking at pictures of all of them and just how not good they look. There was a time where I think that would have made me happy. That would have felt like revenge. The revenge that I've wanted for years against these people who bullied and insulted and marginalized me, to be able to look back at them and say, okay, here's where I am now. Here's how I'm looking. Here's how I'm feeling. And look at you. And as my brain has really been consumed with thinking about all of this, thinking about my former classmates, thinking about Pat, thinking about dying young. My dad died young too. Dying in your 50s, that just doesn't seem right, but that's an aside. I guess I've been trying to really figure out, what am I feeling? Because it's not revenge, but I wish there were a better word than revenge that encapsulates not caring anymore about the past, being unshackled from those memories and those experiences that hurt so bad. Because now I feel good and I feel happy and I'm in a happy, healthy place. If anybody knows what a word for that is, let me know down in the description below so I can start using it from time to time. And the reason I brought all of this up is I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for people to say, I'm so sorry for your loss, because, like I said, I haven't seen Pat in 36 years. But what I wanted to do was do my best to convey this feeling to you, so that if you were ever mistreated because of your interests or your appearance or your weight, and now you're getting yourself to a place that is better health, physically, mentally, emotionally, hopefully through the aid of keto, I just want to share this with you so that on those days when maybe you're feeling down, you can reflect where you've come from, the person that you are becoming, the person that's not carrying 50 pounds of softener salt or more around all day, and being the person that's not carrying that emotional baggage anymore, because that can weigh just as much. So, I don't know if I articulated any of this well or not. I'm probably going to get into the video editor and just be like, okay, this is twice now I've recorded this, not very well. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. See you next week.